Society has always hated artists. This hatred is not the way you think hatred really expresses itself. I mean, artists aren't being burnt in mass or being beaten up on the road. In fact, on the surface, people love to consume art. They binge TV shows, they blast music, hang paintings on their walls. In fact, people seem to love art. But the people who create the art you love, society has spent centuries making sure that these people stay powerless. Vincent van Gogh, one of the most famous painters of all time, just sold one painting while he was alive. Think about that, just one. He died penniless, alone, and convinced that he was a failure. Today his works sell for like hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever, but none of that goes to him, nor did he ever see any of this wealth. Franz Kafka, a pioneer of existential thought, was so disillusioned with what his work had brought him in his lifetime that he instructed his best friend to burn all his work after he was dead. His friend disobeyed him, and Kafka went on to become one of the most celebrated thinkers and writers of the 20th century. And even when artists do succeed in their lifetimes, they're often met with hostility. Nina Simone, one of the greatest musicians of the 20th century, was blacklisted by the US government for her work in civil rights activism. She was monitored by the FBI, driven into exile, and spent years struggling financially despite her massive influence. This isn't just all bad luck. It is a pattern, and this is a pattern that's been repeating for a long time. And let me show this to you in this video. 1. History repeats itself. Throughout history, artists have always been controlled by the powerful. During the Renaissance, the only way to survive being an artist was by getting a patron.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
A king, a noble, or the church. That meant your creativity or your output wasn't totally yours. Michelangelo didn't paint the Sistine Chapel because he wanted to. The Pope wanted him to paint it. Leonardo da Vinci, one of the greatest artists of all time, spent most of his time designing war machines. Not because he loved destruction, but because he needed the money from the Duke of Milan. His genius was at the mercy of those who funded him. Fast forward to the 19th century and we had Romanticism and the idea of the starving artist. The belief that suffering is necessary for great art. That if you really love what you do, you should be willing to suffer for it. But in a way, this was never a romantic idea. It was just a way to justify underpaying the artist who lived in that time period. All under the guise of Romanticism. Let's go over some more. Charles Baudelaire, one of the most influential poets of all time, dies in poverty. Edgar Allan Poe, the father of modern horror, lived in financial ruin his entire life. Even Frida Kahlo, now considered a feminist icon, spent much of her career struggling to be taken seriously. And I don't know why, but this mindset exists solely for artists and creative thinkers. No one tells doctors to work for exposure, you'll be laughed out of the room. No one tells engineers that their passion should be the reward for their work. But to make suffering a part of someone's identity is pretty unique to artists and intellectuals. And is something that most of us have imbibed and maybe even embody. That without pain, there is no success. Why, I want to ask? Why do you, the customer, value the most poignant works of art as almost being valueless? And why do you, as a creator of it, accept that pain is a part of the process? It's a sadistic relationship, I think, that society has with its thinkers. This myth keeps artists desperate, and desperate people are easy people to exploit. This is why an artist willing to sign away work which is potentially worth millions for pennies is a patron or an investor's dream. Infinite value for minimal investment. And if you thought this would have ended a while ago, the 20th century arrived. Corporates took over the places of kings and emperors. Hollywood locked actors into brutal contracts. For example, Judy Garland, while working on The Wizard of Oz, was made to take amphetamine so that she could keep working insane hours. Record labels have always taken majority of the royalties while the artist keeps scraps, and it's basically a chokehold whether you listen to them or you're faced with failure. Prince had to change his name to a symbol just so that he could get fair compensation. Painters were told that their work had no value unless a gallery owner decided otherwise. Jean-Michel Basquiat, one of the greats of our time, whose paintings now sell for over $100 million, was seen as a street kid and never respected while he was alive. And today, streaming platforms play musicians pennies, gigs are lowering costs, everyone is trying to squeeze the artist in 2025, while the CEOs of these companies are richer than any musician to have ever lived. Social media buries posts unless artists pay for promotion. AI models steal work to create AI-generated art without ever crediting the artists whose work they have scraped their data from. The game has always stayed the same, just the tools have changed. 2. The system keeps artists poor on purpose. There's a phrase that people love to say: If you love what you do, you'll never work for another day in your life. But I believe only a person with a great love of pain or a sadist could have coined this term. It sounds nice, but in reality, it's just a way to get people to accept low wages. Imagine telling a lawyer, you should be grateful that you get to defend people in court and uphold the law. You don't need money. You are defending people. You are a good man. Go, Mr. Lawyer, defend people out of the goodness of your heart. The lawyer would laugh in your face, man. But musicians hear this every day. So do artists, writers, actors, anyone in the creative field hears this every day. You should be so grateful that you do what you love for a living. And I do think this is politics of envy. Just because you feel that it must be so much fun to make music or art as your profession and you don't love your job, so it's only obvious that you get paid while the artist struggles. It's so obvious. Rather than questioning yourself that why the hell are you doing a job that you don't love, your reasoning goes to because I do a job I don't love, so a person who loves their job must suffer. It's a self-hating argument in my opinion, and I think you should really ask yourself why you spend most of your day doing something you don't want to at all. And when artists do try to make money, they run into the next problem, which is the gatekeepers. Record labels decide which musicians get funding, streaming algorithms decide who gets heard, gallery owners decide which art gets exposure, publishers decide which books get published. And in our current system, this funding is like a giant chokehold around your neck. Do what I, the patron or the corporate or the label wants, or we cut your work off. This is the template of what we want, and if you don't fit in, goodbye. See you. Thank you for coming. Next, please. That's why most mainstream art sounds and feels just like a McDonald's meal. A great investment, but a bad burger. And as artists, we aren't competing with each other. We are competing with the people who own the system. And 2025 is showing us the end game of these corporates. Make artists replaceable. AI can now generate music, write books, make paintings in mere seconds. If art is cheap, artists are worthless. And that's the game. Point 3. Society needs art but refuses to value it. Every major movement ever was fueled by art. Music fueled protests. Bob Dylan's songs became anthems for the civil rights movement. Film shaped public opinion. Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator mocked Hitler openly while the rest of the world was silent. Literature sparked revolutionary ideas. George Orwell's 1984 exposed authoritarianism decades before it became a warning sign. Artists don't just make things that are pretty and play in the background and keep your mood peppy. They are the originators of the ideas of tomorrow. They change minds, they challenge power, they expose corruption. These are ideas which dream up a reality that doesn't exist right now and may be implemented years later. These are the ideas that matter. That's why every authoritarian regime censors artists first. Do you want to know if you're living under an authoritarian regime? Just see if your government censors art. Straight away sign. The more repressive a system is, the more it fears art. And in democratic societies, they don't ban artists. They just make sure they can't survive. Government slash funding for the arts. School remove music and painting from the school curriculums. Companies refuse to pay fair wages for creative works done for them. And then they tell us, the artists, that we're not hustling hard enough or we have our head in the clouds. But here's the thing, without art, society collapses. Without music, art, architecture, there is no culture. Without writers, there's no history. Without painters, there's no beauty. When people look back at 2025, 200 years from now, they're not going to be going over your auditing books. They're not going to be studying your financial statements. They're not going to be see whether your company had a successful quarter. What will be remembered will be what did your buildings look like? How did people live? What were the writers thinking of? What did the song sound like? That's what they will refer to as being the culture of this time period, not the overinflated piece of real estate you just invested in. Number 4, the only way forward. The truth is the system isn't going to change on its own. Art is enjoyed in retrospect more than in real time. We don't really see artists as human beings, we see them as characters. So we're never really close to one and we wouldn't want to be. But there are ways to fight back for us artists and hope that terrible double-edged sword keeps pushing us through even when probability isn't on our side. But that's what it is. The internet age may have buried us under so much content that we literally don't know what to see anymore. But underneath this avalanche, there is a ray of light. For the first time in history, you can literally do anything you want to and find someone on this planet who connects with you on the same subject. Direct communication with people who want to hear your voice is possible for the first time in human history. And as artists, thinkers, creative people, maybe that's all we need to do. Keep talking and find the people who listen. Crowdfunding, Patreon, Bandcamp, direct sales. Patronage from the people who actually want to consume your art and not from the powers who want to mold it. Because let's be honest, large corporations and big money own everything. And the only way forward for people like us is to communicate and build a relationship with the people who care about what we do. That's it. Anyway, I love my work and I love making music. And this is a song that I'm really proud of having made. If you liked it, please leave a comment and let me know. Thank you, and I'd love to connect with you.